10, 9.
Stand by Studio 3. Prepare to go live. Stouffville Now.
6, 5.
Attention Studio. Cue host.
2, 1, 0.
We are pleased to be joined in the studio for Stouffville Now with Jose Etcheverry, who represents the Green Party in our riding. And Jose, and Brenda Masson is joining us as well. So we're going to get into some of the, I shouldn't say it like that, I'm joining in as well, and these two are going on now. What we're doing here on Stouffville Now is we're bringing each of the candidates to talk for about an hour about where they are in this political election coming up on June 7th, where their parties are standing for, and just generally where things are heading off to. And Jose, I wanted to tell you that I found at the All Candidates debate that your presentation was quite refreshing. In fact, it was very green, and I don't mean to be a play on words, but I wanted to start our time today to talk a little bit about what it is that got you to be so green, if you don't mind the play on the words.
Well, hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning, Community Radio. There doesn't get any better than Whistle FM, and you're the voice of Markham Stouffville, so it's a pleasure to be here. And to answer your question about why am I walking this path, it's because I'm a person that believes not on talking, but in doing. I am an educator, and what I do as an educator is I practice with example, not with words, because that actually helps people to realize that doing complex things, it's not that complex. It just needs patience. So to answer the question about where does my green come from, depends about how much time you want to give me for that answer.
About an hour.
Oh, well, then we can talk about it. I mean, to be quite frank with you, I'm actually Chilean by birth, Canadian by choice. And when I was a young guy, I was very lucky that my parents gave me a lot of freedom, even though we lived in a dictatorship. So, you know, it was kind of counterintuitive, right? Because there was a military dictatorship. People were very protective of their children. But my parents understood that you needed to give children freedom so they could actually grow to be humans that don't have hang-ups, you see. So they allowed me to travel in South America by myself at a very young age. You know, I started traveling by myself at 14,
wow.
Which most parents here in Canada would go like, what? That's just too much. And in one of those trips, I would take always 1 month, 2 month trip by myself with my buddies, and we would go to the south of Chile or to Bolivia, Argentina, Peru, all the neighboring countries, and we would travel mostly, I hate to say this, but hiking, you know. We would
hitchhiking, oh my.
We would hike, and we would hitchhike when we couldn't hike. And in one of those trips, I arrived to one of the most beautiful places in planet Earth, which is a lake in the south of Chile called Tinquilco. And very few people know Tinquilco because it's in the middle of nowhere. Literally, it took us 8 hours walking to get there. Once you get there, there are these forests that are 1,000-year-old trees that can withstand volcanic eruptions, earthquakes. And when I saw that with my own eyes, that's when I became a green. I realized, wow, if you let nature be, nature will owe you. And that's exactly the rest of my life I've devoted it to protect the planet, because this is the only home we got. There's nothing close by. There is nothing like Earth. So to me, and you see it right here in Markham Stouffville, right? Like, thank goodness we got now the Rouge Park that it's going to protect this amazing ecosystem that we have right here.
In terms of you personally, and people talk about being green, and we're all tree huggers, and we enjoy going out and enjoying nature, and we want to preserve it for our children, grandchildren, and so on through subsequent generations. But most of us don't really practice that. We get into our gas-powered gas guzzlers and do what we're going to do. Yet I passed a electric car in our parking lot outside.
That's yours.
It's yours. So
it's my wife's, but
I'm sure she gave you permission to use it this morning.
Yeah, well, she walks to work, right? So she doesn't need
even more green.
Yeah.
No consumption. But you guys actually go out and live the life. My question is really, in terms of an environment where people do or use a lot of fossil fuels, we are not necessarily especially economical in terms of our management of resources. How do you go to all of the people here and say, you really need to be more green? And in fact, if you elect us, that we will. I don't even know Brenda, if you could even say it's a choice. But for example, the pipelines going in that they're working on in the federal government to go out to British Columbia. In my mind, that's a good thing because it means that we'll have a better flow of natural resources. It'll mean more jobs, more money coming into the economy, more goodness collectively. Yet when we look at what's happening in British Columbia, the members of the Green Party there are saying, no, hold on, we're not going to do this, if I'm following the stories correctly.
Correctly. And the missing part of what you just said was that the Greens in BC formed the coalition government with a guy just like me called Andrew Weaver that decided, you know what, enough already of talking about these things. Let's actually put our mouths and our feet where they should be, right, in the parliament. And now there's a coalition government there. And yeah, well, a lot of people are confused about this, right? Because they're saying, oh, well, look, oil creates jobs and, we need the pipelines. We're moving the oil on trains. It'll be safer. And all that is true. But what we forget is that all scientists, and I mean all scientists, agree that burning fossil fuels is going to destroy the planet. And people are like, Jose, please don't talk about this inconvenient truth, to quote Al Gore, right? But the fact is that burning fossil fuels pollutes the air one way or the other. And then it goes up in the atmosphere and it will pollute the planet for hundreds, if not thousands of years, depending on the chemicals that we're talking about. And that's the issue here, is that we cannot keep fooling ourselves, right? And we've seen this movie before, right? Slavery, when slavery was, quote unquote, in vogue, because it was at some point, the United States people would make the argument, well, if we do not continue with slaves, the economy will collapse. And it'll be all these gentlemen, quote unquote, because there were no women allowed in the discussion, saying, well, I must continue to import the merchandise from Africa. Can you imagine saying that these days, importing merchandise? These are human beings chained in boats, forced to actually toil in subhuman conditions, and then whipped to continue to do it until they die. Well, that's where we're at right now, that we know fossil fuels, it's like slaves, and we are slaves all to this economy. I'm lucky I can have an electric car. I build solar charging stations for electric mobility, not because I want to enrich myself, but because I want my students to actually do well by doing good. That's the bottom line.
That's a good.
When you start to get into that discussion and talk about the fact that fossil fuels are destroying the planet, and I think everybody would agree with you to some degree or other, but the government, and I'm going to say all the governments in this country of ours, and I'm going to say right across North America, have become fully dependent on fossil fuel, not as a mode of transportation, but as a revenue generating tool. I mean, you pull up to a gas station today and you buy a liter of gas, and I don't know what percentage, half of it's going in taxes or something ridiculous. And if you were to get people out of gas-powered vehicles and into electric or whatever, you're really pulling the rug out from underneath the government financially. So how do you, as a potential MPP, manage to offset that revenue loss from what we're getting out of the money from fossil fuels?
Well, and this is why I like community radio, because we can talk things properly rather than just sloganeering. So let's go for it. So here it is. Ontario does not have fossil fuels, and we don't have uranium. So investing in neither, it's where we should be going. Because what the heck do we want to, quote-unquote, invest? That's not investment. That's a waste of money. Let me give you an example. We got 10,000 families living anywhere in Ontario, let alone right here in Markham, Stouffville. But 10,000 families living here. On average, each of these families will spend $5,000 a year on energy costs. I'm talking to gas up the F-150, heat up the home, that kind of thing. $5,000 is not that far-fetched per person, per family per year. So that means these 10,000 families are spending together $50 million collectively on energy. And all that money is going out of our community. Because if you don't have oil wells or natural gas or uranium right there, it's going to purchase where it is, in Saskatchewan, in Alberta, in Venezuela, wherever the toxic energy sources are. I call them toxic because they're toxic.
They are toxic.
Right? So now let's go back to Ontario. What do we have here? Manufacturing. The previous generations of politicians managed to destroy that, and they're still doing this. Like factories closing. I've been in Canada since 1989. I came to this province, and it was a manufacturing. We were like the Germans of North America. We had car manufacturing. We did everything at one point in this province. And now we got a situation where people are saying we got to invest in oil. No, we got to invest in electric mobility. And if I go to Queen's Park to represent Markham Stouffville, I'll be saying to the car manufacturers, let's do what the people of Oxford County are doing. Just over in Woodstock, there's a Toyota plant. Did you know that that Toyota plant, until 2 years ago, was making the RAV4 electric? Did you know that?
No.
Most people don't know. So right here in Ontario, we know how to make electric cars because they make them in Woodstock in the Toyota plant. And the mayor of Woodstock, that is my friend, Trevor Birch, amazing guy, got elected like me on the first, well, I hope to be like him, I guess, get elected. And he now goes to Japan and negotiates directly with Toyota deals for the next generation of manufacturing. And Toyota will not manufacture combustion engines anymore, nor will Volvo. And let's talk about Tesla for a second. I mean, here is a company that is completely changing the face of the earth with a private sector focus, not handouts. And the point of the story is this. For me, for Markham Stouffville, what's going to create jobs here? Coming back to my analogy of the 10,000 families. Remember I mentioned to you it's $50 million spent every year? That's $500 million in a decade. Of money that it's going outside of Markham Stouffville on the low end. It's probably much more than that if you do the math properly, because I'm just giving an overview of this. And as a politician in Queen's Park, the first thing I would say to all the other politicians, because that's what you get if you elect me, I can negotiate with the blues, the reds, and the oranges, because I don't belong to them, nor their corporate overlords. So I can actually move in between everybody to make sure that Markham Stouffville can get a good deal and Ontario can get a good deal.
But Jose, you haven't answered the question of how do you replace the tax base that they're going to lose at the pumps when you go to electric cars? Where does that...
Have you seen the tax base on electricity? Just saying. Come on.
Well,
that's a whole other issue. So I think that's a great segue into the hydro thing, because that's one thing that we do really well in this province is we make really good hydroelectric stuff. And our hydroelectric projects between James Bay and Niagara and places like that, we have people from all over the world coming here to look at how we get hydro, how we manufacture hydro. Deswisha, all those big dams. Yet it seems to be something that we're overlooking, and we're paying the highest hydro bills in the world for stuff that we make right here ourselves. It's wrong, isn't it?
Yeah,
somehow?
Totally. And to answer Bob's question, I'll get back to the second point in 30 seconds. Look, we are not a petro province. We are actually a manufacturing province. So what we need to do is switch the taxation base from the bad stuff to the good stuff. It's not that complex. And where I was going with my comment was, if I was in Queen's Park, the first thing I would say to the car manufacturers is like, you need to start making locally electric and hybrid vehicles so we can actually become a can-do place rather than a Rust Belt place. You know, look at Detroit. It didn't fare too well with the path of combustion engines, right? So we could be manufacturing right here, and how you entice them to do that is say, look, Queen's Park, the municipalities, we all buy a lot of vehicles, and we will buy the good stuff made right here if you make it good. That's all we need. And I say to you that the RAV4 electrics manufactured right there in Woodstock. Now coming to the electricity file, and did you notice I call it the electricity file, you call it the hydro file. That's because you remember when we were a hydroelectric province, which was not that long time ago, but we're no longer a hydroelectric province. We are now a nuclear province. And that is why our bills are so big. You go to Manitoba, electricity is cheap. You go to Quebec, electricity is cheap. And why? Because those guys don't have nuclear. Quebec used to have a nuclear power plant. It was called the Gentil nuclear power plant, and they closed it in 2013 because they look at the numbers and say, heck, wind is 4 times cheaper. Hydro, it's already heritage assets in the lingo of electricity generation. That means we paid for it already. It's built. Mm-hmm. So that's why they have electricity that is very inexpensive. In BC, it's the same story. The Greens there, what they're ensuring is that we go, the path of sustainability and profitability. See, this is how it goes all together. You can have the cake and eat it too, so long as you use your brain to create a society that doesn't destroy itself. So now let's go to the countries that are not following this advice. Russia, for example. Would you like to move to Russia and live there in the Putin paradise? Or would you like to move to North Korea, to that nuclear paradise? I want to live in Ontario with my family, with your families, and we can do well by doing good. And that means having a recreating the manufacturing base that we lost by focusing in what people need. Let's go back to the 10,000 families. Imagine all of a sudden you got politicians like me saying, we want to keep that $50 million of your 10,000 families right here in the community. And to do that, there's only 2 options. Conservation, efficiency, that's one thing, conservation is behavior, efficiency is technology, mm-hmm. and renewable energy, which is local energy. Farmers know this. Farmers are really good at using what's in the farm, and they loathe waste because it means going outside of the farm, which it's proven now by science that living in a rural area, it's good for your health because you're in a better mood because the countryside is beautiful. And here in Markham, Stouffville, we still haven't screwed it up all, right? Now, if you let people like some of the guys that are running for provincial office to get their way, they will pave over our farms, our green belts, and then they go, oh, no, I changed my mind. Actually, I'm not going to do it. And then they go back to, okay, you got elected now. Are you going to keep your promise? Which one will be? The one when you
promise?
say
yeah, exactly.
that you
the first
were going to pave
the second one.
or not pave? Mm-hmm. So you need guys like me to be there in Queen's Park saying, okay, let's use our brains and let's act as grown-ups. And let's ask around the best experts in the planet so we can have the best province in the world. It's not that complex, and that's why I'm running for politics, because I'm hoping to get this message across and be able to represent Markham Stouffville properly.
Okay, Markham, I'm in Stouffville. This is Stouffville Community Radio. Stouffville, Whitchurch Stouffville, the area that is actually the boundaries of Whitchurch Stouffville, which goes right up to Davis Drive and south down to Highway 7 and across to the 404 and over to the Durham line. We've got a big area here with major concerns in terms of our tax base. Development has been frozen on the Oak Ridges Moraine. There were a lot of people who were hoping that it would become available, and it didn't. Personally, I'm happy with that. But then when I sit with the local politicians and we have talks about the tax base, we don't have the tax base that Markham has because of their, what I consider to be urban sprawl and overdevelopment. So we're not getting that same tax base because we don't have the same number of people per square inch. So here we are in Stouffville with this very unique situation. We have the Oak Ridges Moraine, which needs to be protected. We have agricultural lands which need to be protected. There's a huge industrial park in Newmarket that is encroaching on the 404 and wants to come underneath and over into the Stouffville area. We have politicians on one side of the fence here locally, municipal level, who want that subdivision developed. There's politicians on the other side who want those lands protected. They're prime agricultural lands. As a person who moved here on purpose, I moved here because of the agriculture. I moved here because I used to live in Markham and I used to drive along 16th Avenue and I had houses on the south side and cows on the north side. There are no cows anymore. I moved up to Stouffville, and I don't mind spending an extra 10 minutes to get in here this morning because 2 John Deere tractors were on the road blocking my way, and those farmers are just getting to a field to plow the field. And I drive by the Holland Marsh when I'm going to visit friends in Collingwood, and I marvel every time I go by at that black, beautiful soil that needs to be preserved. At farms like Holshoff's who can't make ends meet now, and they're closing their doors after 2 generations or 3 generations of farming that land. We need somebody who's going to protect these things that are, to me, the most valuable.
And I'm that guy.
And it's hard to do because you're saying all kinds of really nice things, but those things cost money. Manufacturing is so expensive in Canada versus offshore in other places in the world because we have taxes, because we have green laws, because it costs too much money to make things here. That's why the manufacturing went away.
No, the manufacturing went away because politicians close bad deals for the people on a regular basis. I mean, where are the politicians in our province when a company like Heinz says, I'm not making more ketchup here? They've been making ketchup there for ages. Or when
it got too expensive for them to make ketchup here, though. Well, that's why they left.
No, they left because the same thing happens in Germany. Okay, people say, "Oh, Jose, don't talk about the Germans." Well, why not? Those guys are doing very well. Thank you very much. They're protecting their farmlands. Their country is green all over. You know, they got healthy forests. They got beautiful places all over the place, and that's because they understood what you need to tax is pollution, not people. And by doing that, they're able to actually turn this conversation upside down, become really good at manufacturing. Because here is what I'm going to say quickly, two things about this. Number one is to do with the fact that if you create a competitive ecosystem for businesses, turns out that actually makes you more efficient. You know, you can do more with less. That's called conservation efficiency. And then when you go to jurisdictions where they're very wasteful, like in the United States, you actually can thrive because you're so good at doing more with less. And that's how you deal with the higher costs of taxation or employment, wages, that kind of thing. Germans can compete toe-to-toe with anybody, Chinese, South Korean, Indian, not because their wages are low, but because they're really good at what they do. And us Ontarians are the same. We have machinists here, right here in Markham, Stouffville, that can design 3D stuff that most people don't know that exists. And they're selling worldwide. They're going from Stouffville all the way down to the tech capitals of Markham, Toronto, etc. And the second thing I want to say about this is not only we can do better, is that you have to remember I agree completely what you just said about, and I think we should encourage you to run for a political office. We need people, women like you, that know what they're talking about. All I'm going to add is that, remember, we're in a watershed, right? I used to live in Sutton, right by Lake Simcoe. I'm an avid sailor, canoeist, kayaker.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
And every time I see the water flowing through our fields here in Stouffville, I remember where the water's coming from, you know, and this is a gift. I mean, First Nations have known this for a long time. They would use the Rouge as their highway to gather there in the, banks of the Bob Hunter Memorial Park.
The First Nations maps were all based on the riverways.
You see what I'm saying? So we need to actually protect nature and the waterways. And coming back to your points about the employment lands, well, that's where Markham's going to be really handy to Stouffville, because Markham can point out how not to do it, right? It's clear. But also it can point out how to do it. Because did you know, like in Highway 407 and Kennedy Road, or highway just south of 407 on Markham Road, there are solar buildings that use no natural gas whatsoever. They have 250 units in one of the big ones, condo units, with the lowest condos fees in Canada. And
wow.
This is where it starts getting exciting, right? Because look at the building that is being built in front of the train station. That building, I don't think it's going to be a solar building like the one I just described you. And the question I have is, why not?
Oh, exactly. I was the vice chair, actually co-chair, of the building committee for Whitchurch Highlands Public School. Mm-hmm. And Whitchurch Highlands Public School was a round school built 50, 60 years ago. They took the school down, and we petitioned the board with excellent professionals to have a green roof on the new school. They said, well, that's not what we do with schools. And we said, well, we're not a normal school. We have 17 acres here in York Region, in Whitchurch, Stouffville, the largest playground not only in Ontario, but in all of Canada. Let's use this playground so that other schools can come to this school and see the showpiece that it is. Showpiece this school as your environmental school. Let's do a green roof. Nope. Let's do geothermal heating. No, because then you get air conditioning. Well, no, air conditioning is a byproduct of geothermal. We're using the geothermal so that we can have heating at a reasonable cost for a school out in the middle of nowhere. The board refused to do it because that would give our school air conditioning, and an elementary school is not to have air conditioning. They refused to look at it. We had a company that was going to donate wind turbines because we're in the middle of a farming area on top of a hill. Perfect place for wind turbines. No, too dangerous in case there's ice. A local farmer next door to the property volunteered to have the wind turbines on his property, and the Board of Education still turned us down. Everything we did to turn that building into a showpiece for the York Region Board of Education in a green building where children can learn from the very beginning of their little lives all about greening this planet. And every single option we proposed was turned down. No discussion, end of story, turned down. And we need politicians who are going to stand up to those organizations and make things work.
And speaking about slowing down and turning around, we're going to take a pause for news.
That's a good idea, Bob.
Yeah, no, it happens at the top of every hour.
It does.
And we'll be back. This is Stouffville Now. We're talking with Jose Etcheverry from the Green Party. He's the candidate here with Brenda Masson. And we're going to come back and talk about, some of the other aspects of possibly being elected, or hopefully being elected, and, how you would transition things around. And that'll be all coming up right here on 102. Stouffville Now will be back in just a moment on 1029WhistleFM.com. You're listening to Stouffville Now here at 1029WhistleFM.com. We're joined today by Jose Etcheverry, who's running for the Green Party here in Markham, Stouffville, and Brenda Masson. I always get these mixed up because I was in Markham and Unionville, and there it was Markham Unionville. So we keep changing everything around.
And I grew up in Thornhill, where Markham used to be that place way east of where Thornhill is now, and now it's all Thornhill and Markham.
And I have to pass on in this discussion. While the news was on, I could hear this discussion happening about kilowatt hours and solar panels and everything else, Jose. And I wanted to ask a question, because it's one thing to talk about being green, going green, putting in solar, renewable resources and all of that stuff. But we're at a point in time, or a point in energy, where we've been doing things a certain way. We have an infrastructure built around that, with Hydro One, with the government, with all sorts of businesses that are set up to do this. How do we move from what's going on today? And I personally believe that, the hydro situation in this province is completely out of control. How do we go from the mess we're in today to a green, managed environment?
So let's call it a prosperous community, right? Because we throw the word green around and people close their minds about these things. I'm talking about prosperity here. What I'm talking about is protecting the earth will actually yield immediately good jobs and prosperity. So how do we do it? Let's start with practical stuff, because I'm not a sloganeering person. So big mistake number one that needs to be addressed right away in Queen's Park is, why the heck, if the Pickering nuclear power plant was designed to last until 2014, are we allowing these guys to keep operating this until 2025? That's insane. Nobody in their right mind would get in an airplane that was vintage 2014 to be scrapped for metal. And hey, let's get on. We're going to Paris in this jet because we think the wings still look really safe. And yeah, it's a little old, but it looks trustworthy. Trust us. Get in. I'll be like, pass. I'm actually going in the brand new Airbus or Boeing, whatever. And that is where the money is going, right? Like right now, all the colors, blue, red, orange, are not saying beep about this. We're the only ones saying, okay, let's have a grown-up discussion about this. And if we're going to put 10, 20, 30 billion dollars, billions with a B, Bob, like you, in nuclear power, why are we going to do this? To benefit the workers that work on that? Heck, we would be way better off retraining people to do better things, like in Quebec, in Manitoba, in British Columbia, in Newfoundland, in Germany, in Denmark, in Norway, and the list just goes on and on and on. Instead, we're having a corporate control group of politicians that are pandering to the will of a small union and the people that bought the Bruce nuclear power plant, which used to be, by the way, community-owned. And that's just to tell you how we would lower electricity bills, because we could, instead of fixing that mess, we could say, like the Quebec people, no, this needs to be closed for public safety. You remember Pickering Nuclear Power Plant, it's at the bottom of the Rouge River, really. And
it really is, yeah.
Lake Ontario, it's a jewel there. The best beaches in the province, you cannot be there because it's like The Simpsons, with having the outtake of radioactive hot water thrown there. And they'll tell you, oh, this is safe as can be, Well, I don't really trust that, to be honest with you. As a scientist, I know what's there, and I want to be as far away. And now you know why I live in Markham, Stouffville, because I could have lived for free in my mother-in-law's house in close to the Rouge station right there in the Go. She was 5 kilometers from there, right? And I said, well, no, I'd rather be upstream as far as I can from here. And she actually ended moving to Swan Lake herself, right? Because she wanted to be close to my kids. Point is, how do we make money? It's not by destroying what gives life. It's by enhancing what gives life. And farmers, thank goodness, we still have them right here. Because I understand this, year after year, you degrade the land will not yield. And you see it when I moved in 2005 to the neighborhood. There was a farmer right there on Resort Road, right? Started with the organic strawberries. I'm not going to say who they are so people don't think I'm promoting one specific farmer over another one. Yeah. But now they got the orchards going, and they've proven to their own children, because they got children like I do and like most people do. And they know that it's possible to farm really good food right here. And all of us go there happily. It's the highlight of my life to go eat the fresh stuff right there. It's not polluted. It's delicious. And we need more of that. And it's a shame that the farmer markets here in Stouffville closed, because now we got only the one in Markham. And I was there last week. I wasn't there politicking and talking about this, that, and the other. No, I brought all my teams of researchers, and we showcased our solar technologies to charge electric vehicles. We had an electric bicycle there, and we had a time of our life. There was a York University Science Fair that I participated, because I do have a day job. Like most other politicians don't have a day job. They're just doing this because they need to eat, I guess. But my point is, by having a real job, I actually bring real experience to solve the type of problems that we've been discussing.
Well, you kind of live the life that you're talking about.
I was only going to mention, in terms of some of the other issues on the election platforms, we have a minor issue happening in healthcare. Massively out of control, long wait times. We have serious problems with the senior population. Not that seniors are an issue. There's just a lot of us now. And, what are we going to do with all the seniors as we start to get older and rely more fully upon the healthcare system? So for two topics, what are we going to do about healthcare?
Well, let's tackle first the healthcare and then the seniors. The seniors, it's easy, right? Like, we need to talk to them to see how they can enhance their quality of life. People know. They've lived long, so they know what works and what doesn't work, and they have very crystal clear ideas of what needs to be fixed and what's broken. But coming back to the earlier point, I had the pleasure/displeasure of being locked up, quote unquote, for the budget of 2018, right before the election. The province, put out the budget, and
that's an election budget.
It's an election budget. You see, I'm trying to be polite, right? But my point is this: is that I read the document, 307 pages, and was there a mention of preventive health? Zip. Was there money for preventive health? Zip. So here we have a situation where we're treating the healthcare system in the same way we treat pollution. Right? It's
everything's a Band-Aid.
It's an exhaust pipe. Oh, we'll put a filter on it. It'll be fine, trust me. And instead, what we need to do is put money on nutrition and fitness, because those two things actually are essential for health. And fitness, don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating everybody running. What I'm saying is mental health depends on bodily health. And we get that by going to the great outdoors. We got golf courses here, and people use them because they love walking in nature. And what I'll do if I get elected is work with the federal politicians to make sure that the Rouge Park can be awesome. Because right now we got a problem. We got a problem called ticks. Did you know that now you can walk freely in the woods right now because the tick population is going insane? And,
okay, now you're reading my mind.
Lyme disease is a problem. So
the federal government has not taken enough of a stance on Lyme disease. Not last summer, the summer before, 2016, I was bitten by a tick, and I had Lyme disease.
Oh, my God.
And I was fortunate enough to be treated by a German neurologist who happened to be here on vacation and specializes in Lyme disease, only to find out that the tick bite that I'd gotten in 1989 in Long Island, New York, had given me Lyme disease the whole time. And interesting. So Lyme disease is near and dear to my heart. The federal government hasn't done enough. I'd love to have Jane Philpott in for a discussion about that. It came close, but not close enough, and that's a federal issue. And this conversation, at the other meeting there, got all pulled to federal stuff,
but it's
provincially and locally. If we pull it right back to, I pulled 5 ticks out of my dogs last year and 1 back in March from one of my dogs. They need 6 degrees and they start thriving again. And the York Regional Forest, the Rouge is south down there in Markham, but for people who live here in Stouffville, we use the York Regional Forest, and we're always walking up in the area that's kind of Highway 48, just east and west, all along that corridor.
I do it myself.
And the ticks are epidemic.
They're
epidemic.
Wild. But what you have to remember, this goes back to the argument of preventive health. Everybody knows that prevention, an ounce of prevention is better, right? But the issue here is that we're not putting money where our mouths are, right? And I told you, I read the 307-page budget for 2018.
So when you redo the budget, if you were to redo the budget from a green point of view, what would be different in that budget in terms of healthcare?
A total focus on preventive health, right? Like you still got to fix the remedial part of the equation, right? Like it's unacceptable that people have to be in long wait lists, etc. But nobody's talking about the other part of the equation. How do we ensure we don't get sick in the first place?
Right. How did that lineup start in the first place?
Yeah, and I'll give you an example of what needs to change, right? Like my wife's a high school teacher, right? She started teaching in Sutton, right?
Yeah.
And in Sutton at the time, she was a family studies teacher. We're talking a long time ago, in the 1990s, 1991 to be more precise. And the cafeteria was run by the family studies department. Her department ran the cafeteria, which meant no kid went hungry, ever. Because if they saw a kid that was looking like needed food, they say, come here, have food. That's called preventive health. It's called nutrition. And because it was a not-for-profit cafeteria, they could do whatever they saw fit. And they knew the kids, they knew which ones were having problems at home, and they took care of the community. That's what a good politician can do, can make sure to ask the question to the school boards. Excuse me, where are you coming with giving these cafeterias to Aramac?
I hear what you're saying here, Jose, but I still have this big question in my head about all these doctors we have in the province and all the money that they're getting, all these people backed up in hospital wards that can't get in to see anybody. We have a whole raft of seniors who are more and more dependent on the medical system for pretty much everything, because now we've got free drugs if you're over the age of, or under the age of 24 and over the age of 65, and we have a whole medical orientated society, and I believe it's the largest single grouping of financial expenditure. So in terms of dealing with the bureaucracy that exists, what would you do if you were forming government?
Well, and let's go back to that seniors question, right? You know, first of all, I mentioned to you, I want to listen to what the seniors have to say about this. My mother-in-law, may she rest in peace, used to live in Swan Lake. So I had an entrance to that place through her to understand what the struggles of that community is all about. Now she's gone, so I kind of lost one of my rocks. She was a very smart Irish lady, and she would be a lot of common sense advice on. And she walked her dog. She lived in a building, moved from a house close to the nuclear power plant, and then advised by me 6 blocks from our house. And she would walk with that dog to see us up to the time she died, because that kept her healthy. Then she broke her hip and had to wait to get a new hip, got her new hip and became bionic woman. And she would say to me, Jose, the key thing to long life is healthy eating and exercise. And she lived a long life. My grandma just passed and she was 97. Same story. Good food, lots of love, and a little bit of outdoor activity keeps you healthy. But we were saying earlier, Bob, problem is you want to now walk in Resort Road, where the new Rouge Park entry in Mongolia right there. The Fed has like a nice couple of tents there to showcase, but they're not doing research on how to deal with these problems that are happening because of climate change. And the ticks are coming because the weather's changing, and they can thrive. And I always say these problems are created by humans. So we need to answer your question, use our brains and look at, some people say, we're going to look into efficiencies. Well, that means firing people. I'm talking a little more profound conversation here, which is, how can we create the necessary foundations for Markham Stouffville to thrive, and for that matter, for the rest of Ontario to thrive? And that doesn't happen in 2 seconds by cutting a tax here or arguing you're going to do this and that. And no, it takes by people that are disciplined, that look at the best examples from around the world, and then experiment in a small scale. So here is a very good example of that. This government did one good thing that I like, which is the guaranteed basic income, right? You have guaranteed basic income, seniors that are in poverty, because that's what we're talking about here. Seniors that are rich are not having these problems. Seniors that are poor, that are going without food, without meds, without glasses, because they don't have what it's needed, right? So basic guaranteed income would help seniors to have, in the last part of your life, when you're most vulnerable, dignity. Dignity is so essential. I'm not a senior yet, but I want dignity when I'm, and I want to build a society that actually celebrates the expertise of living a long life. And I want the schools to be open for the farmers that know how to till the land, to come to teach. Remember, we were talking earlier about the school that you love. Farmers can teach us so much about how to do proper things. And now we have this age discrimination thing going, that most people think that old people are fools. And that's not the case at all. If you're old, you know how to live, because otherwise you'd be dead. And the question is, how do we build a caring society that will look after seniors in the same way they look after us when we were little?
Well, part of the Liberal platform over the last 4 years or more has been to increase seniors staying in their own homes. And that's an interesting philosophy, saves the government a whole lot of money. But the World Health Organization used to say that there were 3 necessities of life: food, water, and shelter. They've now changed that. It's food, water, shelter, and connection. If we keep seniors isolated in their homes where they have mobility issues and can't get out anymore, where they are not a part of a community, they live on average 7 years less. They need that connection. So what would your government do in Ontario to make that connection happen, make that available to seniors, but at the same time saving money and being cost responsible? The graph shows that right now we're on a climb. And we're climbing a mountain that's very, very steep up to a peak that's going to happen when we have so many seniors in our society. The graph also shows that that mountain drops off like a cliff right after that. And we will end up, if we keep building facilities, with a whole bunch of empty facilities and no one to fill them years down the road. So what would be your plan to kind of deal with that situation?
Totally local base. I don't serve the interests of corporations, unions, or even a big party. What I'm going to do is, if I get the trust of the people of Stouffville and Markham to represent you in Queen's Park, is Then I'll be elected, and I will get a budget that every MPP in Queen's Park gets to get what's called a constituency office. Remember that? Mm-hmm. It should be open for the people, right? And what I'm saying is the money is so good that I can rent a very nice place right here in Main Street, Stouffville, because I will put it in Stouffville, not in Markham. Sorry, Markham, if you're listening. You already are getting York University. You got perks. Here in Stouffville, I see Main Street, so many businesses closing, and this constituency office will become a center for social innovation. Look it up in the internet.
With the radio station spot at the back there for the community radio station?
I would be delighted, because that is a funny thing about this, is I ask the politicians, like everybody's familiar with the big mansion that Jane Philpott has up the street. And if she's listening, I encourage her to steal my idea. Open up that mansion so it can be the mansion of the people, and small businesses, medium enterprises can be nurtured there, so we can bring all the know-how of the federal, provincial, and municipal government together in a space where we nurture people and where seniors can be welcome, and we can have there all kind of interesting activities, because if the rent's already paid for and the heat's already paid for, and we all know electricity is high price too, it's all paid by the constituency office, you can have a great place for people to learn how to do things better, share experience, and most importantly, have a good time.
I wanted to ask, because we're running out of time, and we do have these limitations. When people talk about voting or not voting Green in the June 7th election, the discussion line comes down to either we want to remove the current premier, we're going to try and block the Conservatives and the Ford camp from getting into power. And people are suggesting that a vote for the Green Party is going to do nothing more than fragment one of the other camps and becomes a wasted vote. How do you respond?
I say, well, that's a really self-serving argument if you want to elect a red, a blue, and an orange, right? But what we can do together here is make history. Send the first Green to Queen's Park. That is me. Sorry to have to say that, but I'm a politician now. And I have to tell you, I want people's vote, and I will keep people's trust. And I know all politicians say that, but I actually mean it, because I have a job that it's a better job than the one I'm applying for. And the reason why I'm applying to this new job is because I want to serve the community of Markham Stouffville. And I want to be responsible for the decisions that we take collectively and be your voice in Queen's Park, not the voice of a corporation or other overlord. I'm not beholden to anybody. The only person that gives me orders is my wife. And I take them because happy wife, happy life. But the point is, the community...
Smart man.
Well, thank you. I mean, I've been married for a long time, and I understand that the keys for happiness is to listen. I like talking like most people, but I have 2 ears and only one mouth.
Another aspect of the election is that it, in all probability, will have one of the two main parties with a substantial number of seats in the legislature. If it should turn out that you, being a member of the Green Party, would be open and become a decisive vote, would you be open to a coalition government?
Well, this already happened. I mean, now we're not fantasizing here. This happened in British Columbia. A guy like me called Andrew Weaver, exactly like me, we're buddies. He decided to run, got elected, and then in the last election they got 3 seats. And he's good at mathematics. The liberals there that have been in power for a long time, they say, hey, we got 43 seats, you got 3, and the NDP got 41. We govern. And Andrew say, whoa, 41 plus 3 is 44. We govern, because we're going to do a coalition government. And the liberals kick and scream, but the lieutenant governor say, yep, you're right. And now we have a coalition government that is doing pretty amazing things. Mm-hmm. Now, another example near to home, here in Ontario, it's in Ottawa, where Elizabeth May got elected as the sole Lone Ranger there. And imagine, a woman and Green. So talk about the cards stacked against her. Yet she works harder than everybody else. And Elizabeth May, I took my university students to Queen's Park to meet with the politicians there. And there she was. The other guys didn't even bother to show up to a lunch in the Parliament. And there was Elizabeth telling the young people, please go into politics. I know it's tough, but it's very rewarding. And that's when I got inspired and decided to do this against all odds. I realize it is tough, but to answer your question, because I know we're out of time, you vote for me, Jose Etcheverry, you will have a friend in Queen's Park. And most importantly, we could make history to for once in Ontario, change the dial of the conversation. Heck, what can you possibly lose? Like, we got blues and reds and oranges coming out of the yin-yang. Might as well have one green and see what I can do. Worst thing is, you don't like me, you toss me out in the next election. I'll be the first one to quit if you guys don't want me anymore. But give me a shot. Like, I'm well prepared, and I listen. And I told you what I'll do with the money that they're going to give me. I'll open a constituency office. The other thing I'll do in Markham, just to round it up, is I will be there for the York University campus in Markham, so it can be expanded, so it can have a residence where people from Stouffville, from anywhere in Canada or anywhere in the planet, can sleep and right there and walk to school, because there's nothing better than to walk to work, walk to play, walk to school.
Absolutely.
Can we do that? Heck yeah, we can. I know Franz Carpiti. He likes my ideas, the mayor there. I discussed this with him, and he goes, I wish you well. And I say, Frank, you know how to do politics, so that coming from you, it's very welcome news.
Yes.
And that's what I will do. Beyond that, I won't promise you anything, because I can't deliver what I cannot I promise what I can do. And those two things are doable because the money is already there. It's simply having the eyes to pick up the bills from the floor. They're sitting in the floor, and all the other politicians walk on top, and they can't be bothered to bend down to pick up. Green is a color of my favorite bill, the $20 bill. You know, $50 bill, it's a different color, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I'm lost. I was back at the green $1 bill.
Oh, were you?
55 years ago.
Yeah, well,
Greenback.
To me, at the end of the day, prosperity is based on people collaborating. And farmers know this. My brother just moved to New Brunswick because he got tired of the life he was living and moved to a farming area there in New Brunswick. Houses are really cheap there. The first thing the farmers came, they say, you're going to need wood because it's going to be cold. Yeah. And they gave him wood for the entire, and then next day he was cutting wood with them, you know, because they're all farmers, and he helped chop. And what he taught me was that, you know, farmers know how to run the place because they help each other in good and bad times. And we are a farming community, you pointed out to me.
Absolutely.
And people they never should forget who feeds the people. It's
and
not the supermarket.
Stouffville? Who are the founders of Whitchurch Stouffville? They're the farmers.
I take Reeser Road to remind me of why I'm doing this. When things start getting really bad, when I'm going home because our office is in Main Street by the post office, anybody listening, the door's always open. And if we're not there, ring the bell or phone the number in the wall. Because if we're not in the office, we're canvassing. Because that's what we do. To win votes, you don't have to promise stuff. You have to actually meet the people and say, voting green makes sense. Because you need diversity in Queen's Park. The problem is that we have a monoculture of decision-making and thinking. These like lemmings all going to the precipice, the proverbial lemming. And I want to be the guy going, whoa, there's a precipice. Please slow down and let's go to over here, which looks way better. We will have seniors thriving because at the end of the day, that's what's missing. It's missing a caring society. I became Canadian not by birth, but by choice. And I chose to be part of Ontario because it's an awesome place to live. And I chose to live in Markham because it's an awesome place to live, as is Stouffville. But the key thing that I see now, and my wife encouraged me, was run for politics because all the other guys and their parties are destroying our province. I want to help build good things for everybody.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I guess this is the farewell, hasta la vista part of the show. It's been a pleasure talking with you. I know that the Green Party is very green and has always been such, but I wanted to hear, because I was, as I said, very impressed with the debate and the way you presented the Green Party in the midst of the orange, the blue, and the red.
So please, if you allow me one last little comment, thank you. The next debate is coming in Stouffville. Please come to the debates and ask questions so people can actually, we're auditioning for a job here.
Yep, I'll second that motion. We need everyone to come out to these all candidates meetings, voice their opinions, hear what the candidates have to say. And of course, if you can't get there, we'll be covering it all here on Whistle.
Stouffville Now is a production of 1029whistlefm.com. Your comments are welcome. Send them to stouffvillenow@whistlefm.com. On behalf of our entire team, thank you for joining us.